I was 16 when I saw the girl I would marry. She just didn't know it yet. My name is Roderick, and this is the story of how I waited 2 years to take back what was always meant to be mine. My mother had dragged me back to the city for some tedious family obligation. A birthday, a funeral, I don't remember which. The Keaton estate was the same gaudy monument to insecurity it had always been, all marble and poor taste, built by a man trying to prove he belonged. My father, Greg's father, the man who'd traded my mother for a mistress and never quite recovered from the divorce that cost him half his empire. I hated every minute I spent under that roof. But the house next door, that was different. A modest villa with a small garden, nothing like the Keaton monstrosity. And in that garden, I heard a voice that stopped me mid-stride. Our Susan has always loved the color purple. Since she was tiny, it's all she ever wanted. I peered through the wrought iron fence. A woman, elegant, warm, nothing like the cold socialites my father surrounded himself with, was speaking to my mother. They were old friends, I realized. And beside them, half hidden behind her mother's arm, was a girl my age. She wasn't doing anything special, just standing there, hands clasped behind her back, dark hair catching the afternoon light. But when she smiled at something her mother said, it was like the whole garden brightened. "Perfect," my mother replied smoothly. "Purple is elegant. It's always been my favorite as well." I stood there like an idiot, gripping the iron bars until the girl glanced up and caught me staring. Most girls would have looked away, would have blushed or giggled or pretended not to notice. She just tilted her head, curious, and gave me a small, friendly wave. I forgot to wave back. I just stood there, frozen, while she laughed softly and turned away. That night I couldn't sleep. By morning, I'd convinced my mother to extend our stay by 2 days, just to see the city. I lied badly. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She always knew more than she let on. I spent those 2 days doing two things: waiting for a glimpse of the girl next door, and watching the Keaton household rot from the inside. The rot had a name: Greg. He was my half-brother, though we'd never been introduced as such. The legitimate son of the mistress my father had installed after my mother left. He had my father's coloring, my father's features, and apparently my father's complete lack of conscience. I watched him from my bedroom window on the second day. He was in the garden next door, her garden, talking to the girl. She was helping her mother with some plants, dirt on her knees, completely at ease. Greg was saying something, gesturing with his arm, and then he stumbled, cried out, grabbed his wrist. Even from that distance, I saw it clearly. The way he'd positioned himself. The way he'd looked around first to make sure someone was watching. The way he'd thrown himself to the ground with theatrical precision. He'd broken his own arm. On purpose. The girl dropped everything and ran to him. Her face, that bright open face I'd been thinking about all night, was filled with nothing but concern. She knelt beside him, spoke urgently, helped him up. And Greg, the bastard, looked over her shoulder as she supported him toward the house and smiled. Not at anyone, just to himself, like he'd won something. I understood in that moment what kind of creature he was. And I understood, with a sickening lurch, what he'd just won. Her attention, her care, her soft heart, completely fooled by his performance. The purple wind chime arrived that afternoon. I'd had it shipped from abroad, a ridiculous expense for a boy with no income, but I didn't care. It was the exact shade of violet I'd seen in her garden, the exact shade her mother had said she loved. I walked to her door that evening, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. She answered. Up close, she was even more striking, not in the polished, practiced way of the girls I knew, but in a real way, present, fully there. "I'm Roderick," I said, and immediately felt stupid. "I'm staying next door. I saw you in the garden." Smooth, very smooth. She waited, patient, curious. "I brought you this." I thrust the wind chime at her like a weapon. "It's purple. Your mother said you liked purple. I just thought I was making a mess of this. I thought it might look nice in your window." She looked at the chime, then at me. For a terrible second, I thought she'd laugh. But she didn't. "Thank you," she said simply. That's very kind. And then, because I was 16 and impulsive and already half in love with a stranger, I said the stupidest thing I've ever said. Someday you'll leave him, and you'll choose me. Her eyes widened. I wanted to disappear into the earth. But she didn't get angry. She didn't shut the door. She just smiled a little sadly and said, "Safe travels, Roderick." I walked away burning with shame. I just declared myself to a girl who was clearly devoted to someone else. Someone who didn't deserve her. Someone who'd broken his own arm to manipulate her. And yet even then I knew I'd said something true. Not arrogant, true. I didn't know when or how, but I knew someday she would leave him. And when she did, I would be there. I just didn't know it would take 2 years. 2 years of watching from afar. My mother kept in touch with Susan's family. I got reports filtered through casual conversation. Susan is doing well in school. Susan is still inseparable from that Keaton boy, which is unfortunate. Susan defended him in a fight and got hurt. That last one nearly made me book a flight home immediately. Only my mother's calm hand on my arm stopped me. "Not yet," she said. "She's not ready to see yet." I hated waiting. But I'd learned patience from watching my mother rebuild after my father's betrayal. She'd walked away with half his empire and turned it into something he could only dream of. She'd waited, planned, and when the moment came, she'd struck. So I waited. I built myself into someone worthy of being chosen. I studied, worked, prepared, and every night before sleep, I thought about a girl in a garden and the way she'd smiled when I gave her a stupid purple wind chime. Then 2 years later, my phone rang. "Roderick?" My mother's voice was carefully neutral, which meant she was hiding something. "Susan is coming abroad. Alone." I sat up straight. What happened? I don't have all the details. But apparently, the Keaton boy made a grave miscalculation. A pause. She needs someone to meet her at the airport. I was already standing, already moving. I'll be there. I spotted her immediately. She moved through the crowd like someone carrying a weight she'd just realized she could set down. Tentative, but hopeful. Thinner than I remembered. Pale, but her eyes, when they found mine, were clear. "Long time no see, Suzanne." For a terrible moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she smiled. A real one. The first I'd ever seen directed at me, and held out her hand. "Long time no see, Roderick." I took her hand. Her grip was firm, warm, alive. Then her phone rang. I watched her expression shift as she answered. First curious, then cold, then utterly blank. A voice crackled on the other end. Greg's voice, frantic, demanding to know where she was. Before she could answer, I leaned close and spoke clearly. "Shall I take you to see the Riverton campus? The architecture is quite impressive." The reaction was immediate. Greg's voice spiked into panic. "Are you with Roderick? Where are you? Or did you run off with that pathetic bastard just to spite me?" "Enough," she shouted into the phone. "Greg, the most wretched person here is you. Don't ever contact me again." She hung up, blocked the number, looked at me. I raised an eyebrow. "Dinner? As compensation for my impeccable timing?" She laughed, actually laughed. The sound was so unexpected, so bright, that I felt something crack open in my chest. "Absolutely," she said. That night over dinner, she told me everything. The fake bullying, the humiliation, the kiss that meant nothing, the blood-stained sheets Lilith had posted online, Greg's final pathetic attempt to control her transfer. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're here now," I said. "That's all that matters." She looked at our joined hands, then at me. "You said something once. Years ago, at my door, you said I'd leave him and choose you." My stomach dropped. I was 16 and stupid. "You don't have to, I remember it." Her voice was soft. "I thought you were arrogant then, but I never forgot it." She squeezed my hand. "I'm here, Roderick." I left him. It wasn't a declaration of love, I knew that. She was raw, healing, still finding her feet. But it was an opening, a door left ajar. I'd waited 2 years. I could wait a little longer. The months that followed were the best of my life. We didn't rush. I didn't push. I just was there, steady, present, patient in a way I'd perfected through years of practice. We explored the city together. We studied together. sat in comfortable silence while she read and I worked. Slowly, incrementally, she began to trust me. I learned things about her that Greg had never bothered to notice. That she hummed when she was concentrating. She cried at sad movies, but pretended she had something in her eye. That she still had the purple wind chime I'd given her, hung in her dormitory window where the morning light could catch it. "You kept it," I said one day, surprised. She followed my gaze to the chime. "Of course I did. It was the first gift anyone ever gave me just because they thought I'd like it." A pause. "Greg gave me things to impress me, or to match whatever Lilith had, or to prove something. But this," she touched the chime, making it ring softly. "This was just kind." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there watching her watch the chime and let the moment exist. That night, she kissed me for the first time. It wasn't dramatic. We were saying goodnight at her door, the usual routine, and she just leaned in, pressed her lips to mine. Soft, brief, perfect. "I've been wanting to do that for a while," she whispered against my mouth. I kissed her back. "I've been wanting you to do that for 2 years," she laughed. That bright sound I'd come to love, and pulled me inside. "If you've made it this far, I suppose you believe in patience too. Let me know the like. Tell me where you're listening from. I'm curious who else is waiting for something worth having." We were engaged 6 months later. The announcement sent ripples through both our families. Approval from my mother, smug satisfaction from hers, and absolute silence from the Keaton compound. I didn't think about Greg. He was irrelevant, shadow from her past that had no place in our future. But he hadn't forgotten her. The first I heard of it was a panicked call from a mutual friend. Greg had shown up at her villa back home, jumped the fence, tried to force himself on her. I was on the next flight. By the time I arrived, it was over. Security had removed him. Susan was calm, collected, and absolutely furious. He actually said he'd been looking for me everywhere, she told me, her voice tight, as if that makes it romantic, as if I owe him something for finally noticing I was gone. I pulled her close. "He'll never touch you again." "I know." She looked up at me, and there was no fear in her eyes. Only strength. I handled it. She had. She changed her codes, filed a report, moved on. Greg was nothing to her now, but he wasn't nothing to me. That night, I made some calls, started some conversations. The Keaton group was already crumbling. My mother's patient work over a decade, I simply accelerated the process. A nudge here, a pulled investment there, nothing illegal, just efficient. By the time our wedding date was announced, the Keaton name was worth less than the paper it was printed on. I felt no guilt, not at all. The wedding was in a small coastal town, chosen because Susan had seen a photo and fallen in love with it. Every house had wind chimes, colorful, musical, dancing in the sea breeze. She laughed when she saw them and said it felt like the world was welcoming her. I didn't tell her I'd chosen it partly for that reason. Some things were better left unsaid. The ceremony was small, intimate, perfect. She wore purple, a deep, rich violet that made her eyes glow. I wore a matching tie, a detail she noticed and smiled at. "Look at us," she murmured as we stood at the altar, matching like teenagers. "I'm having a moment." She bit her lip to keep from laughing, and I fell in love with her all over again. Afterward, as we greeted guests, a box arrived, no card. But the embossed seal was unmistakable. The Keaton Group crest, a relic of a dying empire. Inside was a ring. A purple diamond, flawless and large, set in platinum. The kind of ring that would have drained the last of the Keaton liquidity. Susan looked at it, then at me. Her expression was unreadable. "He remembered," she said quietly. "I told him once, years ago, that I loved purple. He said he'd remember." I felt a flicker of something, not jealousy exactly. More like annoyance that he'd managed to insert himself into this day, even from a distance. Then Susan smiled, tossed the ring back in the box, and handed it to an assistant. "Donate it. Someone will appreciate it." I raised an eyebrow. "Just like that? Hey." She turned to me, her eyes bright. "Roderick, do you know when I first learned to love purple? Your mother said you always did?" "No," she shook her head. "I mean, yes. I always liked it, but loving it. That started when I was 16. When a very nervous boy showed up at my door with a wind chime he'd had shipped from another country just because he Overheard my mother mention my favorite color. I stared at her. You remember that? I remember everything. She took my hands. Greg never gave me anything that cost him anything real. But you gave me something before you even knew me. You waited years without asking for anything. You were there when I fell apart, and you never pushed, never demanded, never made me feel like I owed you. Her voice cracked, just a little. You're the one who taught me what love actually looks like, Roderick. Not obsession, not performance, just patience, kindness. Purple wind chimes. I pulled her close, there in the middle of our wedding reception, and held her while the chimes sang all around us. I love you, I said against her hair. I think I've loved you since I was 16 years old. She laughed, wet and happy. I know, you were very obvious. Shut up. Make me. I kissed her. The chimes kept singing, and somewhere in a crumbling manor house on the other side of the world, a man who'd once had everything and thrown it away probably heard them too. I didn't care. I had finally stopped waiting. That night, after the last guests had gone and the chimes had quieted with the wind, we sat on the balcony of our suite and watched the stars. Roderick, her voice was soft, drowsy. Tell me about the chime again, the one you gave me. I smiled, pulled her closer. I was 16. I saw you in a garden. You waved at me and I forgot to wave back because I was too busy being struck stupid by your smile. Your mother said you loved purple. Mine said she loved it too. And I thought, I don't know what I thought. It's just that I wanted to give you something. Something that meant I'd seen you, really seen you. She was quiet for a long moment. No one had ever really seen me before, she said. Greg saw what I could do for him. Lilith saw a rival. My friend saw the rich girl, the devoted one, the one who'd do anything for love. But you just saw me. A girl in a garden. I kissed her temple. The most beautiful girl in any garden. Flatterer, truth-teller. She sighed, content, and I felt the last walls around her heart dissolve completely. Thank you for waiting, she whispered. I'd wait forever, I said. I'm glad I don't have to. The stars wheeled overhead. The wind chimes slept. For the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly at peace. Because I'd learned over all those years of waiting that the best things in life aren't the ones you chase. They're the ones you're patient enough to let come to you. She had come. Finally, beautifully, forever. She had come.
If this story stirred your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a dose of love dopamine. I'll keep bringing you more tales of passion, heartbreak, and redemption crafted for the ones who still believe in love. And if you stayed until the very end, thank you. You're the kind of soul who believes in love, even when it hurts. Love harder, dream deeper, until the next heartbeat.